You never get a second chance to make a first impression. We all know that. And it's never been more true than the DeBoer and Freeze game, part 1. Auburn and Alabama find themselves in much different places than they were at this time last week. Alabama looked like they were rolling their way into the playoff, and Auburn still hadn't figured out a way to win a big game. Well, fast forward to today, and Alabama fans are asking more questions about the DeBoer hire, and Auburn finally got off the schneid. It took a couple overtimes, but they did it against Texas A&M. An Auburn win in the Iron Bowl would only cause more disarray around Alabama's new head man, and an Alabama win would definitely lessen the blow of the loss at Oklahoma and the ever-evaporating playoff hopes. Now, we know the stakes are always high in this game, but this year it seems a little bit heavier as far as the future goes. This is the greatest rivalry in sports, and I don't care what anyone else, including David Cone, says. It's one thing to get in a fight with your neighbor. You go into your house, he goes into his. It's another thing to get in a fight with a family member that shares the same roof as you do. There is nowhere to hide. The truth is, Alabama fans think Auburn fans don't deserve to walk on the same side of the street as they do, and that they're really second-class citizens. Auburn fans view Alabama fans as the corporate class who only love Alabama football, not the actual university. And while there is plenty of hate to go around, there is also respect amongst the players. You don't see fights in this game, regardless of the trash talk leading up to it. Most of these guys grew up playing against each other. But sometimes in life, you got to choose a side. Now, I expect this game to be nothing less than a physical fist fight, and whichever coach can make chapter 1 of his new head coaching matchup a successful one, well, they'll find themselves in a pretty good pole position heading into 2025, regardless of if they make the playoffs or not. David Cone, sure he agrees 100% with everything I just said. Former Michigan quarterback, my brother. Former Western State, Colorado wide receiver, Blaine Crain. Coney, we always go back and forth and have fun with the rivalry game stuff. We do it every year. But when you look at the Iron Bowl, and you look at, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the game and keys and what needs to happen. But the future, there's so much more at stake, it seems like, kind of with the uncertainty now surrounding DeBoer a little bit. Not that he's going to get fired or anything like that, but Alabama fans are used to a certain standard, and that hasn't been met up to this point. You lose this one it's one thing to get, a paper cut. It's another thing to get hit with a samurai sword. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of questions. You're married to an Alabama girl. I'm married to an Alabama girl. We know how that goes. What do you think this means for Alabama 1 going forward if they were to lose, or if Auburn were to lose? Like, kind of how do you see this playing out as far as perception, because we know that's reality?
Yeah, 2 new coaches trying to set stability and get their feet underneath them. I don't think things will be pretty for Kalen DeBoer if they go 8-4, and along the way you've missed the SEC championship game and the college football playoff when it's tripled in size. But for last weekend, for most of the season, I don't think Auburn's record has been indicative of the football playing on the field for most of the season. Unfortunately, at the end of games in some very critical moments, that has cost them, and that means the losses have added up. So I, like many, weren't surprised to see Auburn be able to beat a Texas A&M team when they have the home advantage of Jordan Hare. You add on top of that, not just the confidence they're going to be coming into the Iron Bowl with, but they're 5-6. They're trying to get bowl eligible so that they don't have to sit at home for the next 6 weeks over Christmas break while everyone else is playing football. You add on top of that, 4th and 31 last year, one of the most disastrous losses in program history. And then you add on top of that, not just Alabama losing last week, but not scoring a touchdown against a 500 team that knocked them out of SEC championship contention and possibly college football playoff contention. I just wonder how much of that recipe will factor into the game this Saturday. And I wonder how much of that can be offset because the game's in Bryant-Denny.
I want to give you I want a yes or no answer on this. If Kalen DeBoer loses to Auburn on Saturday, is he on the hot seat going into next year?
Well, hot seat, what do you mean by hot seat?
If they replicate, that's a good question. If they replicate exactly what happened this year and they lose at Auburn again the next year, do you think there's a chance he could be fired?
Well, I'll just say that I think he was on the hot seat with some fans if he went undefeated this year.
That's a true statement.
And that, you talk about standard. That guy set the standard, right, for the entire sport. So for guys like Roll Tide Willie, he's on the hot seat no matter what he does. For other people, more rational fans, and look, the fans don't make the decisions. I think that Greg Byrne is going to, take into account all the information. I'd love to hear an Alabama fan call in today and tell me that 8-4 and losing to Auburn is okay in year 1. at Alabama. Yeah, I don't see it.
No, I'm with you 100%. Blaine, on the Auburn side of it, I think one of the reasons I was talking to our friend Zach Blackerby at Locked On about this morning, one of the reasons that A&M win was so big for Auburn is at least you have one in your pocket, right? Because if you lose that one, you lose against Alabama. I mean, in reality, you finished 4-8 without a decent win to your name. But when you look at this, what Hugh Freeze is bringing into Tuscaloosa, we've heard the trash talk. Say what you want about it. It helps with preparation. During the game, nobody's running around thinking about trash talk. Where it helps is preparation. But what does this game in terms of Hugh Freeze's future mean to you?
I mean, I don't care who the coach is. When it comes to the Iron Bowl, you need to win it. You need to win it, especially on the Auburn side of things. And I think Hugh Freeze, even if he loses this game, if it's close, he'll be okay because of what he's building around him. Yeah. I think the recruiting class is saying enough for itself. And I think the talent that is Auburn right now, it's young talent. It's something that you can build on. And I've said this throughout the year, and there's a reason why Auburn's record is this, is because inconsistent quarterback play. The biggest knock on Hugh Freeze has been you did not go get a quarterback out of the portal.
And one game doesn't make up for that, in my opinion. Texas A&M game. And we gave Peyton Thorne his flowers. I was happy he did well. Congrats to him. But one game does not erase. Now, if there was ever a game that could erase a lot of bad blood before this or inconsistency, it'd be this one. But it's a tall task for Auburn to go into Tuscaloosa.
And I said this on yesterday's show. Auburn's in a great position right now. You're in the position just to see the world burn. You could beat Alabama, make them with 4 losses, and now that Kalen DeBoer seat turns all the way up. I don't care. Well, the Alabama fans I've talked to, they hate what's going on right now in Alabama. Everything, the physicality seems to almost be lost at Alabama. Things are going on in the locker room that are lax that you're not used to seeing with Nick Saban there. And if you're Kalen DeBoer and you lose this football game, you're 8-4. Now the struggle becomes this. Can you keep your best players? Can you keep your best players? Because I promise you, a weak Alabama is phenomenal for everybody else in the nation because Alabama has talent. They'll forever have talent. They can pick and pluck guys away from that because you're not holding up to the standard of what Alabama is. So if Alabama loses this game, they're in treacherous water.
Well, it's a perception thing too, and I agree with some things that go on in the Feinbaum show. Some things I disagree with. That's why it works and it's been so successful. And I actually like Paul. I think some people think that I don't like him. I do like him, but we got to be realistic here. The question was when Kalen DeBoer came into Alabama, is this thing going to maintain at the level that it was, which is almost impossible, and I thought was unrealistic, or if there is a drop, how far is the drop? So that question up to this point hasn't been answered and wasn't going to be answered until we got through the season and the postseason playoff and all that stuff. But getting off on the right foot was paramount for Kalen DeBoer. And if he beats Auburn and they go 9-3, hey, you didn't make the SEC championship game. You might not make the college football playoff. We'll see. But you beat Auburn. You beat Georgia. You did some good things there. This game is just so heavy to me, just for the perception of that changing of the guard and what that means. Because the Alabama fans that I know remember the Shula era. They don't want to go back. You gave them the filet mignon. They don't want to go back to eating bologna. They don't want to go. They want the tomahawk steak. They don't want Spam and eggs, which I actually like, by the way. But you see what I'm saying? I mean, you get it as much as anybody.
Well, I mean, look, a rivalry of this magnitude, a win in that game can endear you to fans in such a way that it buys you equity. So that point stands alone. It'll always be the case between Auburn and Alabama. But this year specifically, let's just look at the numbers because despite the fact it's a big rivalry, some people may be saying, well, if Auburn loses and goes 5-7, it's already a disappointing year because 7-5 was supposed to be the floor. But let's just look at it here. If you win this one, you're 6-6. Maybe you go play in the what? Meineke Car Care Bowl or something.
Maybe you get a win.
7-6 and 5-7 are very different when you're trying to keep players out of the transfer portal and you're trying to close the deal here as signing day approaches. But on the other side, look at the numbers. You're talking about 8-4. You're definitely out of the college football playoff then, and maybe Alabama already is. We'll see what the committee says in the next couple of weeks. But 8-4, and then you go play in a bowl game or something. You could win or lose depending on if your players are getting ready for the NFL draft. But if you win this one, you stay 9-3. If you go win a bowl game, you've hit the 10-win mark. And so while it has been a disappointment, at least Alabama fans could say, well, the guy did come in and at least honor that 10-win mark that Nick Saban hit every year except for his first one. That's why I think this game is so important on top of the rivalry stakes.
And I want to go ahead and get into the gameplay. We're going to get to the chat. Remember, if you donate and it's on topic at the time, it will get read. We appreciate it. If not, it'll get read at the end, speaking about the donations. As far as the nuts and bolts and what has to happen in this game, I talked about the trash talk leading up to it. Again, after having been in it, and you guys know this as well, the trash talk is bulletin board material is preparation material. Mm-hmm. There was never a time when the ball was snapped when I was like, oh God, this guy said this, I got to hit him harder. That's not how it works. Everything's moving so fast. You know this. There was never a time at Michigan where you got a snap and said, oh man, well, this guy said this, so I'm going to throw it at him. It's to prepare yourself because you play how you prepare most times. A couple keys I have, starting on the Auburn side. This isn't a complicated formula. This isn't the end of Interstellar or me trying to figure out what reality they're in Inception. I thought Oklahoma did a tremendous job, not only having a plan going in, but executing that plan. You have to make Jalen Milroe beat you from the pocket. You have to make him beat you from the pocket. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to make a couple plays when it breaks down, or he's not going to hit you on a power read or a Q power or the zone read every once in a while. But Oklahoma, and I saw Nick Sheridan talking about this in the press conference as well, they had him going horizontally. He wasn't able to get vertical a lot. So Jalen Milroe can beat you from the pocket. If you don't believe me, go look at the first half of the Georgia game. But if you're playing the numbers say the best chance you have is to make him beat you from in between the tackles. Right? It's easier said than done. But if you're Auburn, the question becomes, can you do that without having to bring extra guys in the box and leave yourself exposed to Ryan Williams or Jeremy Bernard or some of the guys that Alabama has on the outside that can really hurt you, not just, vertically and deep, but in the intermediate, now screen game, bubble screen game, throwing the hot and stuff like that. If Auburn is able to get Alabama in third and passings, the third and sixes, the third and sevens, and they are smart about the way they rush. And to me, you play zone coverage against Alabama. You've talked about that till the cows have come home. Jalen Milroe struggles more with zone coverage than he does with man. And in zone coverage, you're kind of able to rally to the ball carrier a little bit more, especially when it's the quarterback, right? Because again, if I'm in man and I'm a corner, man eyes and zone eyes are different. Zone eyes, if I'm a corner, we're running quarters, I'm playing Q to 2, right? I may be on the outside wide receiver, but I'm looking at the quarterback to number 2 in case we're in cut coverage or anything like that. And eventually, right, when I clear everything, my eyes will turn back as I get my drop in depth, unless I'm in cover 2, to that receiver. Well, in man eyes, there is no looking in. Now, we used to trick quarterbacks. We used to try and trick them with leverage, and we used to try and trick them with eyes. But when that ball is snapped, my eyes are on that man. So if he runs me off and clears me out, not only am I exposed underneath, but if Jalen Milroe takes off, he can really hurt you. So I expect Auburn to try early to play an even box. Bama's going to go with their 11 personnel and things like that. But zone coverage, to me, is what you got to do. On the Auburn side, well, just from a defensive standpoint, I'm sure you probably agree with me.
All of that makes sense with Auburn on defense. I was thinking about Auburn on offense. This is an Alabama team that has given up so many rushing yards this year. That's really their Achilles heel. Coming off of a 257 rushing yard performance against Oklahoma, Auburn has got to figure out a way to run the football effectively, and that's already what Hugh Freeze really wants to do, and he finds unique ways to do it. I keep thinking about the Georgia game last year when he found unique ways to get Peyton Thorne downhill. Jarquez Hunter, one of the better running backs in the league. You got to be able to find a way to stay on schedule against this Alabama defense that's already proven that we will give chunk plays consistently on the ground. I think that side of the football could be the Auburn's defense best friend in this game.
Well, and to me, and this is going to be hounded all week, Kane Womack, the DC at Alabama, is going to be talking about stopping the run. Not only Jarquez Hunter, who's one of the leading rushers in the SEC, and Auburn's got a couple other good backs that can hurt you, but also Peyton Thorne running the ball as well. Because if you're Auburn, look, you've got this the Bourbon Bowl.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to make a bowl, trying to make the Bourbon Bowl, actually. So you're going to run Peyton Thorne as much as humanly possible. I'm just wondering, Blaine, if you're Auburn, how much eye candy are you going to give Alabama this week from a pre-snap motion, right, from formation into the boundary, from mixing up your personnel groupings, kind of like how Texas A&M did against Auburn, to try and find some sort of formation or leverage advantage when you know that Alabama is going to try and stop the run. And then when you get your opportunities, right, spitting the ball out in the quick game. Maybe you're not able to run the ball with that much success on the road against Alabama, so you're trying to reinforce it with a short passing game that are easy throws for Peyton Thorne early, and that will maybe even out Alabama from an alignment standpoint defensively to open up that run. Are you pitching backwards a little bit early here, or what are you doing?
Man, I wouldn't say I'm pitching backwards, but when you talk about eye candy, it'd be like Willy Wonka's factory in there. I'm throwing everything I have at this Alabama team.
Taste like schnozberries?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm throwing everything I have in the bank at this Alabama football team because, look, Hugh Freeze, you win this game. A lot's forgotten. A lot's forgotten, and you have to give it the ball to your best players. Yeah. Jarquez Hunter. You have to let Jarquez Hunter eat. Cam Coleman. You have to let Cam Coleman eat. Lambert Smith. You have to put the ball in your best players in the most key positions. And I think Hugh, by this point, has to realize that. And at the end of the day, if I'm Hugh Freeze, I'm running the ball until you stop me. And Dave, you brought up a great point in Peyton Thorne in that Georgia game. It wasn't just Peyton Thorne creating on pass plays. It was designed quarterback runs. Peyton Thorne is not the fastest guy in the world, but he has enough speed, in my opinion, where you have to respect it on that defense. And I thought Oklahoma did a great job. Great job last week with the orbit motions and just opening up opportunities to make it easier.
They did what Vanderbilt did.
If you watch those runs, half of those big plays, that guy's not getting touched until he's 8 or 9 yards down.
But let's get into the mind of the coaches, though. If you know that, and I know that, and David knows that, and our audience knows that, Bama knows that. So they are going to be going over corrections and telling their defensive guys, we are going to get the same thing. Mm-hmm. Why would they not do it? So if you're Auburn, you have to counter that somehow, right? How do you counter that? Maybe it's going in those same formations like we saw that diamond set that Vanderbilt run and running different things out of it maybe from the passing game that we saw Vanderbilt do a little bit on 3rd down and 5 and 3rd down and 8 to be able to get to those stick routes. That's what I'm interested in. And again, if I'm Auburn, I'm taking shots. I'm taking a couple shots early at a heavy personnel. If you're going to play man, if we're going to get skinny, right? And you're going to play cover one and you're going to have that one guy in the sky, and I may go 12 personnel. I may go 21 personnel, where I end up with just 2 wide receivers on the outside, one at Z, one at X, Cam Coleman and KLS, and running it deep. But one of the biggest advantages, and you won't hear people talk about this week, but if you're an Auburn fan, one of the biggest disadvantages you have going into this game is special teams. I love what the 9th string kicker did, the one who, was doing Sudokus in class at Birmingham Southern, who they got out after the disaster that has been the Auburn's field goal unit this year. I don't expect him to be able to go into Tuscaloosa and be perfect. In this game, he might have to be perfect. But what should give you even more worry is Oscar Chapman had a horrible game last weekend against Texas A&M. And if you're going to have any chance to win this game if you're Auburn, it is field position. If I am Bama, I am licking my chops in the return game. I am licking my chops when I look at who I have, the guy who won the Groves Award last year at kicker, who came over from Miami, Ohio, versus what Auburn has. So that's one area where you're not going to hear a lot of people talk about it. It's going to be about Peyton Thorne and Jalen Moreau and this or that. But this game could come down to the punter, and it could come down to the field goal kicker, which means it's going to come down to the long snapper and the holder as well. That's a big deal.
Well, I'm fine with Auburn taking the shots. They hit some big ones against Texas A&M, which we're going to break down later in the show. And Alabama gave up plenty in the second half against Georgia. On the pitching backwards point, though, throwing on downs that are typical running downs, be careful with it early, because if you put it in Peyton Thorne's hands early on 1st and 10 and you haven't even given yourself a chance to see if the run game's working and you get a tipped pick 6 or something, then you find yourself in a deficit, which Auburn's not good at coming back. You'll be kicking yourself for not seeing if you could even establish the run early, which I don't think that's going to happen. That's a worst case scenario. They're going to need all sorts of I don't want to say tricks, but they're going to need all sorts of strategies to be able to beat Alabama on the road. And I think they'll come in with plenty of those strategies.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the chat and let's move.
All right, Chad, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. If you donate, it's on topic. It will get read. We're going to start the day off with a $3 donation from AU Timmy. What's up, man? He says, Jake, if I'm Auburn's defense, how am I game planning against Jalen Milroe?
Well, I always... And when I look at this matchup, and that's what it comes down to, it's matchups, it's personnel, right? How do I feel about my front seven versus Alabama's offensive line and whatever sort of nub tight end they have, or however you want to call it or frame it? I want to go out and see if I can just stop it playing even, because I don't want to give Alabama and Jalen Milroe the confidence early throwing the ball, because I do think Jalen Milroe is a rhythm shooter as a quarterback. A lot of quarterbacks are. Some guys shoot good all the time and they can come back from not throwing the ball well. I think Jalen Milroe has to get off to a good start from a confidence standpoint too. I know he's played in a lot of big games, done a lot of really good things, made a bunch of big plays, but he's still a human being. and confidence and momentum is a real thing. So if I'm Auburn's defense, if I'm DJ Durkin, if I'm Charles Kelly, I'm going to see if I can line up in my over front. I may go my 3 down with the 4th walk in. I'm not going to try and get crazy and run stunt early and bring a bunch of exotic pressures on run downs. We can talk about 3rd and passing, trying to get weird sometimes with the way Alabama struggled to pick up with some of these pass protections. But I want to see if we can go toe-to-toe, just keeping it even, so I can give some help over the top against Ryan Williams. So maybe my corners can be a little bit more aggressive jumping things. Maybe I feel a little bit better in cover 2 if I realize that Jalen Milroe is trying to get a bunch of short throws early that we can play trap coverage to, especially to the boundary. So to me, kind of like David was talking about, seeing if you can run the ball early. From the defensive side, I'm going to see if I can play my base stuff and beat you and get you into passing downs, and then I'll build from there. If I can't, then I'll pull the parachute, and we'll realize we have to Harry Potter our way through this thing. But if not, that's going to give me more confidence, and then I start asking myself, here's what I don't want to have happen if I'm an Auburn fan. Don't rush 3 this game. Please don't do it. DJ, listen, I'm begging you, dog. You're bad at it. You're really bad at it. All right, and this Auburn, you need your pass rushers on the field, and you got to pass rush this guy smart. You can't run past him. But Auburn cannot rush 3 in this game and get away with it. Don't overthink yourself, because I know what you're going to think. Oh man, if we rush 3 and we play zone coverage behind it, not only is Jalen Milroe going to be confused, we're going to have an extra guy to defend in space. Well, the more time you give this guy to run around, and the more time you got to cover some of these witches that Bama has, and you've already shown you're bad at it, the more trouble you're going to be in.
If you do it, you got to do it like Georgia did in the SEC championship.
The 3 and 2 spy.
Rush 3, double spy, but it's really layered pressure.
You may have just nailed it.
You know what I mean?
You may have.
It looks like it's rush 3.
And you called for that during the live stream of the Georgia-Bama game, and they did it.
All right, let's go to JR. He says, Kalen DeBoer already has 3 losses he can't afford, and if he loses the Iron Bowl at home, I don't know where you go from here as an Alabama fan.
Well, the question is not, would they fire in this year? They're not firing in this year. So if you're an Alabama fan that thinks that, you might as well wish in one hand and do something else in the other and see which one fills up faster. The question becomes, what is the level of pressure that he's going to face the next year when, if it goes bad, you could see Alabama decide to hit the eject button with Kalen DeBoer and move on, I think. That's the biggest question. Hey, YouTube, let's win some money. College basketball, college football, NFL, maybe even the NBA for all 9 of you out there that watch it. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button.